Right then, let's go from here. So yeah, it's better to understand why a person thinks a certain way than trying to combat what they think is. And that's essentially what we do when we're family, isn't it? We want to get to know people, be a friend, a brother and sister to them. I think one of our conversations yesterday was kind of about this. If you trust someone, you're more likely to trust them with your worldview and say, what do you think about the way I've harmonized this? Can you see anything in it? Rather than, we wouldn't probably take that and go to a complete stranger and go, what can you pick holes in with this? And we don't trust them as much. It can be far more scary.
It also comes into the tribes thing as well. So if changing your mind about something is so intrinsically kind of tied up with actually your more kind of social identity of yourself and your tribe, if you are kind of closer with other people and people who don't necessarily think in the same way as you, it makes that whole thing far less threatening. It kind of means that it's not so black and white, like us and them, and I've got to, you know, where you've got to move. Everything just becomes a bit more easy and a little bit less unknown. So we sometimes talk about, yeah, kind of like maybe going to stuff that you're not that keen on. So I mean, we did say like, oh, if you stopped going to a meeting where they do fraternals, maybe go back occasionally and go to their fraternal. Even if it's not your thing, you still kind of, you're socialising and breaking stuff down. However, I don't think I want to go to a fraternal. So that's probably not a very good example. But if there's stuff where you think sort of, oh, this isn't really my scene, or this is a bit boring, or this is a bit too out there for me, just sort of thinking about, should I challenge myself a bit with this? And because actually the person who's organising it, or the person who it really means a lot to, would really think that, oh, cool, that person is here, and it helps you to see different groups of people as not so kind of other.
Yeah. Yeah. So we're going to talk about a framework. Okay. So we were talking about structure before, how sometimes just adding that little bit more structure can help in these situations and not make it quite so unknown. So what we're basically doing here is we're looking at these passages in the Bible that say, you know, it says, love one another. I think I delivered some of these things as a Bible class once, and there was somebody there who said, well, why don't we just do what the Bible says? It says love one another. And like I was saying, that love one another thing can be sometimes, well, how do we love one another? And sometimes these frameworks, they are structures. They're not to be seen as laws or exact ways of doing things, but we can apply some psychological thinking to things to make us go, okay, well, here's the best way to love someone. We can use this framework to help us love each other. And this one is called Transactional Analysis. Don't be too scared by how sciencey and psychological that sounds. It's very simple. It's simply about how we interact with each other, the transactions we have between each other. When we're talking, we're exchanging transactions.
So why are we looking at transactional analysis?
So transactional analysis is something that's part of couples counselling. And as in relationships, we're having those relationships because we want to share future together. We want to get along together and move into the future together. And I think it's similar as communities. We want to share our futures together. And so, you know, why do we want to share our futures with each other, right? The simple answer is we've got a great deal of love for and care for each other. Just as in our personal relationships, in our families, we have a lot of love for each other, and we want to be able to work things out together. As
so why does that mean we should look at transactional analysis?
Have you got an answer?
I would say because it's something that helps couples get along better and interact with each other and really think about kind of what's going on beneath the surface. And yeah, we should look to have relationships that are as positive as possible. And it's not just a couples counselling thing. It's something generally for looking in a little bit more detail about what's going on in different types of interactions, particularly dysfunctional interactions.
Yeah, we want to see where maybe we're being a bit dysfunctional in our transactions. And if we can have better transactions, dialogue between each other, then that's a good thing. When we talk to other people, we channel one of three states we've learned through life experience. Okay, so when we've mapped through unknowns before, we maybe have channeled our inner parent and been able to get through things like that. Maybe we've channeled our inner child, but we also have an adult ego state that we can channel. I'm going to play a short video that there's a guy with a lovely voice. There's a lovely YouTube video on transactional analysis, and I'm going to play that now.
TA suggests we shift between three distinct ego states. Parent. This is a state in which you think, feel and behave in ways based on how your parents and other authority figures acted. Adult. Here, you think, feel and behave in response to the here and now. You're able to draw on your full life experience, and generally you're geared to a realistic, objective appraisal of your experiences. Child. In this state, you think, feel and behave just like you did in your childhood. We move between the ego states all the time.
Okay, so don't be too confused by ego states either. That's just what you're channeling. So we can channel our parent, we can channel our inner child, but we also have this adult level that kind of is a bit more rational and reasonable and can be a bit more objective with things. We can slip into our parent or child states in reaction to what people do or say. We can push other people into their parent and child states as well. So like we were thinking about Job yesterday, they were causing friction against each other. They're kind of pushing each other into different states, into being reacting as a child or reacting as a parent.
I think the most basic way, I mean, again, we're not at all experts in this. It's just something that we found quite interesting. When you look at the Job thing, I would say they're trying to parent each other. The friends are trying to say, oh, well, Job, you don't fully understand how the world works, so I have to show you and tell you what you've done wrong. Then Job is standing up saying, what? Go on, then I'll wear my sin on my sleeve, you know, I'll tell you what's right. This is the correct theology, for example. And kind of they're both trying to be a parent and make the other person behave like a child who should be like, oh, yes, sorry, now I understand. But neither of them are doing that. So it's what's called a cross transaction, which again is why the book of Job is so long and so unproductive for such a long time.
They never resolve their transaction. They're always trying to get one up on the other and be more parental than the other and say, no, look, we're wiser than you. No, I'm wiser than you. Here's an example of that in Job chapter 15. Eliphaz says, what do you know that we don't know? What do you understand that is not clear to us? Both the grey-haired and the aged are among us, older than your father. So Eliphaz is saying, in our group, in the three friends, we have age and wisdom of the grey-haired among us. So they're kind of putting themselves in a position of wisdom and authority and parentalness above Job. Okay, so have you ever come across this before? Do you ever maybe listen to your parents or friends try and parent the other one? You can probably see this a lot online. But God points out that the reason these conversations never go anywhere is because of pride and because we're talking down to each other.
So I think quite an important thing of when people are trying to parent each other is that it's not always a bad thing. So when you're being a parent, the idea is like, I'm being a parent and I'm trying to make you a child. I'm talking down to you. And sometimes that works if someone's in a vulnerable position or someone is literally a child, say, who is ill. And they say, can I have a glass of water? Or their parent says, I think it's time for you to go to bed, you're poorly. And the child's like, yes, thank you, look after me. Well, actually, I don't think any child says thank you to being told to go to bed. But, here's some palpable and here's a hug. Like, oh, yes, thank you. I'm upset, I'm a child. And sometimes we might, kind of be feeling sad and go to our friend or family member and just sort of like, oh, I feel really rubbish. Can I have a hug? And the person's like, oh, okay. Well, let's do this and then we'll go for a nice walk and you'll feel better. Sometimes being a parent and a child are complementary and it's what that person needs and it's what this person can give. But it can also provoke you to be different types of child.
So let's have a look at this guy. This will probably elicit a different response in different people in this group because we differ in how we respond to people parenting us. Sometimes, like Naomi was saying, we can go into the childlike state to evoke the parent in someone else. It's like, oh, I can't do it. I'm tired. And you want someone to parent you and make you feel better. But sometimes someone will parent us and we will have different responses. We can become complicit. So imagine this guy stands up here and says, I hope you didn't go out last night to the discotheque because that's a sinful place. And
listening to rock
and or roll. And we can respond to that as two different children. We can be a complicit child and go, oh no, and I'd never do that. I'll make doubly sure I will never go to the discotheque. Like you'll be a complicit child and you'll agree with them and you'll respect their authority, parental position, and be like,
and it's
yes.
it's kind of like a position of humility, isn't it? It's kind of like, oh no, I'll definitely never do that, and kind of a bit of a position of fear as well. Oh no, definitely not. I would say it's more the complicit child is kind of fear, but also an element of respect.
Yeah, a respect for their authority and the structure within that authority sits. And sometimes that's useful, sometimes that's a good thing to get to map through our lives. You might also respond as a rebellious child, and you might sit there and go, huh, boo to you, I'm going to the discotheque tonight.
And some people already looking at that picture of a very traditional church, not unlike some Christadelphian setups, might already be looking at that and going, oh, boring.
Yeah.
I don't want to have to sit there and listen to that.
I want to rebel against this person and what he represents and what he stands for and his message. We were listening to a Bible class recently, a recorded one, and it was a speaker that was speaking in quite a parental way. And one of the sisters in our class was like, I agreed with everything he said, but I felt like I wanted to rebel against it all as well.
Yeah, she was like, but I've just got this feeling of saying, I just want to say, stuff you. She was like, even though I agree with everything. And then that was really interesting because we'd just been reading about this. We're like, yeah, it's that thing of someone taking on a parental role. And again, another idea where the actual content of what you're saying is almost secondary to the emotional thing that it elicits. So and in a faith situation, being spoken to from a place of sort of a parental ego state where someone is trying to talk down to you and make you be a child, I personally don't think that's very valuable, because it either means that you're being a complicit child and you're doing something out of fear and kind of respect for sort of like, this is just the established authority and I'm going to say yes and agree with whatever and I'm not really going to think about it myself, or it makes you a rebellious child where it's not even the thing that they're saying is the thing that you're rebelling against. You're just rebelling against sort of like, oh, don't talk to me like that, maybe I will go and do that kind of thing. And both things aren't very useful. They're more to something to do with someone's pride, like we were talking with Job, rather than the actual allowing someone to sit and actually have the space on more of an adult to adult level where they can sit and really think about those ideas without just having that immediate reaction.
Yeah, adult to adult is the ideal. We'll go on to what that looks like in a second as well. Yes, okay, so we can go to those child states. We can also assume a parental state with this person and be like, yes, I completely agree with not going to the discotheque, and I'm going to make sure I tell everybody as well and parent them just as much. So you kind of assume you stand shoulder to shoulder. Yeah.
Dob someone in.
Right, so a really interesting way of looking at transactional analysis is through a game. It's called a game. It's called the Why Don't You, Yes But game. And this is a short video that explains that one.
Here's a scenario. Person A says they have some problem. Person B starts suggesting solutions. One by one, person A rejects every single one of them, giving a reason why each solution wouldn't work. B eventually runs out of ideas.
Okay, so there's a scenario here where somebody kind of, as the name was saying, maybe he's in the child state and goes, I can't do this. I can't do my essay. I need some help. And they get a bit like childlike. And the other person maybe responds as a parent and says, well, you could try this. How about this? You try this. But every single time that they suggest something, the person in the child state's like, yeah, I tried that, but it didn't work. Don't want to do that. And
the pattern is they say, yeah, but I haven't gotten enough money. Yeah, but I can't really be bothered. Yeah, but I don't want to ask for a favour. All of those sorts of things.
Maybe that sounds familiar. That might be a conversation that you've had before.
Yeah, this is so. It's Eric Byrne who came up with transactional analysis, and he's there's a kind of very strangely written book that he wrote in the 80s, but it is a very popular thing that is used in a lot of psychology and counselling. And one of the main examples of it is this "Why Don't You Yes But" game, which is quite interesting, and it's often used in lots of videos about it, because it's the kind of thing you listen to and go, oh yeah, I do that with my mom all the time, or oh, that's what happened the other day, like when this went awry. So it's the idea of someone is basically asking the other person for comfort and sympathy, but what they're getting is a parental list of ways to solve their problem, whereas the person doesn't actually want their problem to be solved. They just want that attention, they want that empathy, really.
Yeah, it's not a request for a solution, but a need to be listened to, and know that their partner is there for them to hear what they're going through. And I think sometimes, so we're going to talk about the emotional conversation that probably needs to happen first whenever we're going to try and have a challenging conversation. And that's the conversation of why that person might need to be listened to at that point.
So trying to put it into like an ecclesial context. For me, this was quite common in the discussion where someone would go to someone else and say, look, why is it that women can't give talks in church? And then the person might say, oh, well, you know, if you're a lady, you can be a Sunday school teacher, you can always study at home, you can set up a sister's class, all these kind of things. Whereas the person isn't, I don't know if anyone else has been in this position, but I thought like, oh, well, I don't have time for that. And I don't want to commit to more things. And I don't want to have to rally people around to come to a sister's class that's going to end up being a bit lame and all these kind of things. Like, you're not in a position to be kind of like, oh, no, I don't want to do any of those things. The actual root of what I'm talking about here is that I'm struggling because I have emotions to do with this. I'm trying to navigate the contradictions that I can see in people's interpretations, what I see in the Bible. This is disturbing to me. So actually underneath, maybe that's what that person is actually saying. So they don't need a list of solutions. They actually need someone to say like, yeah, it's difficult, isn't it, when you're navigating this? And, you know, more of a, if you can be really insightful into kind of the roles that you're taking on in a conversation, realize that, oh, hang on, this person doesn't want solutions. They just want acknowledgement that they're really struggling with something.
Yeah, we have it's called an attachment need. This need to be listened to, an attachment need. So if you were to come as an adult and ask that question, you'd literally spell out, listen, I'm struggling with this. I want you to sit down and I want you to just listen through my struggle. And that's a very adult way of coming to somebody. But often we're not very practiced at doing that and saying exactly what we want. We often revert to maybe speaking like a child and eliciting a parent in somebody else. So it's actually something you really need to practice being able to do effectively. Because it turns out, yeah, person A doesn't want solutions, they want to be listened to. We're not even particularly aware that that's what we want. And that's some of this self-awareness stuff. It's actually like, when I come to someone with a question on sexuality, the first thing I probably want that person to do is listen to me. We might go into that conversation and set it up for a back and forth debate, when actually you have an emotional need first to be listened to, and then you can move on perhaps to the intellectual content of that. This ties in with something called emotional attachment theory. So we have emotional attachments. We're emotionally hungry and we reach out for connections to satisfy our hunger. That's why we're always checking our phones for likes and comments. They're like little crumbs of attachment that we get from people online, and they're really not very filling. The actual deep conversations we have with people, you know, those late night conversations where we really tune into people, that's like a gourmet meal. But a like on your Instagram post is like a rice cracker. Rubbish. There is a study that was done in Romania after the Iron Curtain and communism fell in Romania. There were lots and lots of orphans, and the orphanages were always kind of very low staffed, and they could only really take care of the basic needs of these orphans, like food, shelter, and clothing. And also there was kind of an ethos of, let's not pick up each baby individually and hold them and cuddle them, but it was a bit more like a farm in that sense, that it was just food, shelter, and clothing because there were so many of them. And people studied these orphans after they grew up, but tragically, a lot of them died from like this just starvation of emotional attachment. Many of them grew up with emotional attachment issues and problems in their relationships later in life, and it's a real clear
learning difficulties as well. So attachment theory is just an example that needing to satisfy our emotional needs that underlie a lot of our interactions. It's not just a kind of airy-fairy millennial thing. It's something that actually, if you're starved of this, it's in the same way as we need physical food. If you don't have emotional attachments, in extreme cases, like in the Romanian orphanages situation, it literally affects your brain development, and you can even kind of not survive and have failure to thrive and things like that. So it's just the underlying importance of this, that people have an emotional attachment needs.
Yeah, so we're always reaching out, it's probably subconsciously as well, we're reaching out for an emotional attachment to be met. So this is a nice quote from Sue Johnson. She does a book called Hold Me Tight, which is really good. if I appeal to you for emotional connection and you respond intellectually to a problem rather than directly to me on attachment level, I would experience that as no response. So the person that's saying, oh, I'm really struggling with my essay, I can't do it. If you respond to them with solutions in an intellectual way, then they'll see that as no response, because they were reaching out for being listened to, but it's been turned around to them having to listen to you because you're providing all the solutions, when actually the first thing they want, they probably do need a solution at the end of it at some point if they want to try and get their essay done. They probably know the answer to their question already, really, but if you can listen to them first, you meet that emotional connection need. They get full up of that emotional food, and then they have more stability then to maybe actually go back and do the essay themselves without you needing to do anything. So you need to listen for the appeal to emotional connection, especially if you're a figure of authority. This person wants to be listened to first. If you start with solutions, their need to be listened to has been relegated and they become the listener. And I think this is interesting. We probably, when we think about like challenging conversations and these conversations we want to have, we probably think we don't want emotions to get in the way of these sorts of discussions. They will get in the way of us being rational. But they're in the way by default. Like our emotions are always there. We need to acknowledge them first, be aware of them throughout these sorts of discussions. Don't try and just like, so emotions, they don't matter, push that away, let's get into the nitty gritty of what this verse means and what that verse means. We probably need to start the conversation by checking in and saying, okay, what are you bringing to this conversation? What emotions does it have for you? It might even be that their emotions for that conversation are to do with the week that they've had. Their job's on the line. They're really dealing with isolation badly. And so they need to get that off their chest first. Go on.
So yeah, so a good reason why we have to prioritize those things is that and I don't want to overgeneralize this and kind of shoehorn it in, but there's lots of stuff around if you have secure attachments. So if you had secure attachments growing up, or if you have secure attachment in your current relationships, or within like a particular group that you're in, there's lots of kind of psychological research that suggests that if you have good attachments with people, you find it easier to kind of talk about your own emotions, so kind of identify and talk about your own emotions. You find it easier to think about abstract concepts, think about other people's points of view, able to be kind of a bit meta. So that just means thinking about your own thinking and things like that, which are all things that if you're going to have a challenging conversation, you really need all of those things. You need to be able to sort of think about your own emotions and think, oh, hang on, that challenges me. Why does that challenge me? Oh, that's because that's what my Sunday school teacher used to say and they scared me, or that kind of thing. Thinking about more abstract concepts. These are all really abstract concepts. And also thinking about other people's points of view is vitally important when you're having a challenging conversation.
So if we can listen to people and let them express their emotions, then they can feel more stable to then go on to have the actual conversation that maybe you want to have. Putting that groundwork in and getting that stability is really, really important.
TA therapy's goal is often to strengthen the adult state. If you're interested in doing that, one starting point is to look at what events and people trigger your parent and child states. Do you assign responsibility equally? Do you have to be in control? Do you feel forced into taking control? Do you have a hard time making decisions and try to get others to make them for you? Do you feel fundamentally you're not as good as others? And what might these things bring out in other people, perhaps in reaction to you?
Okay, so there's some questions about that you can ask yourself to see what state you're in. Do you have to be in control of everything? Like Job seemed to want to parent everything and be in control of everything. Or do you feel forced into taking control? Other people are being children around you, and so you have to go, oh, look, all these kids are here, I've got to deal with this thing and take control. Or maybe you have a hard time really making decisions and you want other people to be the parent in the situation and you get them to take that responsibility. And I think that last one, if you're not feeling like you're not as good as others, it might make you think like everyone else is the parent, everyone else has got it together, everyone else is in control, and I'm not particularly in control. And you're probably channeling your parent or child if you're doing those things. So just to recap before we round up and open up for discussion, try to be aware of what you're channeling. I don't think we've really spoken about what the ideal is. So adult is where you are thinking more objectively, a bit more rationally, and you're kind of, in that name said meta state where you're thinking about how you're thinking about things. You're being more self-aware and tuning into how this is making you feel. And so maybe you can say to somebody, listen, this essay is making me feel really anxious. Can you sit with me and listen to me while I just like roll off my thoughts about this? You're more aware of what you need and what you want. And you're not going to put responsibility on the other person to take that responsibility from you. Think about what emotional attachment the person needs first before offering solutions or advice. This idea of listening first. One of the things we're going to do tomorrow is look at something called the listening technique, which is really, really useful for doing this and getting into this space. It's really powerful. Did you want to say anything else before we open up this discussion?
Guess what I thought about during that was someone can still join a conversation in a kind of negative way, but you can kind of use these ideas to think, actually, I'm not going to respond as a petulant child, or I'm not going to join in with them gossiping and being parental. I'm going to try and bring this down to a kind of adult to adult rational thing, because it's all about what you provoke in the other person and what they provoke in you. So if you can think, no, I'm going to bring this down and try and have a more kind of equal, non-judgmental, non-rebellious kind of conversation with that person.
Mm-hmm. Most of this material is from these 3 videos. I've shown you brief clips of these videos. There's a series of 3, they're about 8 minutes long each. They're really, really useful. I'd recommend watching them at some point today if you can.
Also, counselling and therapy of any kind is also very
I think counselling should be a very normal thing to do. I think it's very hard to navigate the world out there. So having therapy and stuff is healthy and shouldn't be seen as like, oh, they're going to therapy, oh dear. It should be like, great, this person's trying to figure out how the world works. Essentially, church should be a kind of therapy as well.